VIP Lounge Diplomatic Incident Script. When a black woman trying to enter the VIP lounge was told, "This isn't for you," she smiled and said, "You're right, this place is too small for me." But when she pulled out her passport, the entire airport's senior management was called into an emergency meeting, and that security guard never worked there again. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a moment that could have escalated into an international diplomatic crisis. The afternoon sun filtered through the massive glass windows of John F. Kennedy International Airport's Terminal 4, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors that gleamed under the bright fluorescent lighting. The terminal buzzed with the usual symphony of international travel, rolling suitcases clicking against the stone floor, multiple languages blending into a harmonious chaos, and the constant hum of departure announcements echoing through the vast space. Among the steady stream of travelers, Dr. Amara Washington moved with quiet confidence, her elegant navy blazer complementing her natural grace and the subtle authority she carried in every step. She had arrived on the morning flight from Washington, D.C., completing what had been a grueling 3-week diplomatic tour across several African nations. Her mission had been successful, securing crucial trade partnerships that would benefit both the United States and several emerging African economies. The briefcase she carried contained documents worth millions in potential revenue, agreements that had taken months of delicate negotiation to finalize. Her compact carry-on held the essentials for her brief layover, before continuing to Geneva, where she would present these findings to the World Economic Forum. Every detail of her appearance spoke of understated sophistication. Her natural hair was styled in an elegant twist, secured with a simple gold pin that caught the light as she moved. The navy blazer was perfectly tailored, paired with matching trousers that moved fluidly with her confident stride. Her jewelry was minimal but expensive, a thin gold watch that had been a gift from the Secretary of State, small diamond earrings, and a simple wedding band that reflected her 15-year marriage to a fellow diplomat currently stationed in London. As she approached the Delta Sky Club entrance, Amara felt the familiar weight of expectation that came with her position. She had traveled this route countless times over the past 5 years, building relationships that had proven invaluable to American foreign policy interests. This particular lounge held memories of important conversations, deals closed over coffee, and the quiet moments of preparation before crucial meetings that would shape international relations for years to come. The lounge entrance was marked by sleek glass doors, adorned with the Delta logo and premium branding, flanked by 2 security personnel stationed behind a polished reception desk. The area was designed to project exclusivity, soft lighting, comfortable seating areas visible through the glass, and the subtle message that this space was reserved for a select few. The younger guard, Marcus, was perhaps 25 years old, with carefully styled hair and the eager demeanor of someone still relatively new to the position. He glanced up from his computer screen as she approached, his eyes quickly scanning her appearance with the practiced assessment of someone trained to make quick judgments about passenger status. His colleague, Robert, was considerably older, perhaps 55, with graying hair and a stern expression that spoke of decades in various security positions. His uniform bore more service pins and insignia that suggested authority within the airport hierarchy. When he looked up from his paperwork, his gaze lingered on Amara's dark skin and took in the details of her appearance with a different kind of scrutiny, one that seemed to weigh her worthiness against some internal checklist of expectations. "Excuse me, ma'am," Marcus said, his tone polite but carrying an underlying caution that suggested he had already reached certain conclusions about her presence. "This is the Sky Club Premium Lounge. Are you perhaps looking for the general boarding area? It's back down the main concourse past the food court. You can't miss it. There are plenty of signs." The question stung, though Amara's expression remained perfectly composed. She had heard variations of this question in countless locations over the years: hotels, restaurants, conference centers, anywhere that her presence challenged someone's preconceived notions about who belonged in exclusive spaces. She set her briefcase down on the marble floor with deliberate care, the sound echoing softly in the space between them. Actually, she replied, her voice carrying the refined accent that came from years of international education and diplomatic training, I believe this is exactly where I need to be. Robert leaned forward slightly, his voice taking on an edge of authority that suggested he was accustomed to being obeyed without question. Ma'am, this lounge requires specific credentials. You need either a first-class ticket with Delta or our partner airlines, or special government clearance. I'm sure you understand. These are federal regulations, not something we can simply overlook. The implication hung in the air between them, unspoken but clear. In his estimation, she clearly possessed neither the wealth for first-class travel nor the status for government access. His tone carried the patient condescension of someone explaining obvious facts to someone who had clearly made an error. I do understand the requirements perfectly, Amara replied calmly, reaching into the inner pocket of her blazer with deliberate slowness. And you're absolutely right about needing the proper credentials to access this facility. Her fingers found the familiar leather of her diplomatic passport holder, a specially crafted piece that had been issued by the State Department when she received her first ambassadorial appointment. The holder itself was unremarkable, designed to blend in rather than attract attention, but its contents would tell a very different story. As she withdrew her passport, both guards noticed its distinctive black cover with gold embossing that immediately marked it as something beyond the standard travel document. The cover bore the Great Seal of the United States, an eagle with outstretched wings clutching arrows and an olive branch with the motto E pluribus unum, inscribed in elegant script. Below that, the words diplomatic passport were embossed in gold letters that seemed to gleam under the fluorescent lighting. Marcus's brow furrowed as he accepted the document, clearly recognizing that this was something unusual, but not yet grasping the full implications. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it, and when the identification page came into view, his expression changed completely. The diplomatic seal and official stamps were unmistakable, but it was the title printed in formal type beneath her photograph that made him freeze. Ambassador Dr. Amara Washington, Special Envoy for African Affairs, United States Department of State. The photograph showed the same composed woman standing before them, but now the context had shifted dramatically. Below her name were additional details that painted a picture of someone far removed from their assumptions: advanced degrees from Oxford and Harvard, appointment dates, diplomatic immunity status, and a series of official endorsements that spoke to her high-level position in international affairs. "Sir," Mehmet whispered urgently to his colleague, his voice barely audible over the ambient noise of the terminal. "You need to see this immediately." Hassan snatched the passport with the impatience of someone who expected to quickly resolve what he assumed was simply a matter of someone carrying fraudulent documents. But as his eyes scanned the identification page, his confident demeanor began to crack like ice under sudden pressure. The color drained from his face as the implications of what he was reading hit him with full force. This wasn't just any diplomatic passport. This was the identification of someone who regularly met with heads of state, who had direct access to presidents and prime ministers, who negotiated agreements that affected millions of people. More immediately relevant, this was someone who had diplomatic immunity and whose mistreatment could trigger an international incident that would make headlines around the world. I sincerely apologize, Your Excellency," Hassan stammered, his voice suddenly formal as he attempted to recover from what he now realized was a catastrophic error in judgment. "There's been a terrible misunderstanding on our part. Please, allow me to escort you to the lounge immediately." But Amara didn't move. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, studying both men with the same careful attention they had given her moments before. When she spoke, her voice remained calm but carried an unmistakable weight that seemed to fill the space around them. "A misunderstanding," she repeated softly, "or an assumption based on what you saw when you looked at me." The question hung in the air like a challenge thrown down between them. Neither guard could meet her gaze directly now, their eyes shifting to the floor, the computer screen, anywhere but the face of the woman they had so casually dismissed moments before. Around them, other passengers in the nearby seating area had begun to take notice of the unusual scene unfolding at the VIP lounge entrance. Conversations grew quieter as people strained to understand what was happening, sensing the tension that had suddenly thickened the air. The younger guard, Mehmet, shifted uncomfortably from foot to foot, acutely aware that this situation was spiraling beyond anything his training had prepared him for. "Your Excellency," he said, his voice cracking slightly, "we were simply following standard protocol for lounge access verification. We treat all passengers with the same level of scrutiny." "Protocol," Amara repeated, and there was something in the way she said the word that made it sound like an indictment. "Tell me, when you apply this protocol, what specific aspects of a passenger's appearance suggest to you that they might not possess first-class tickets or diplomatic credentials?" The question was delivered with surgical precision, cutting straight to the heart of their assumptions. Both guards understood immediately that any answer they gave would expose the biases that had driven their initial reaction to her presence. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the distant sounds of the busy terminal. "The thing is, gentlemen," Amara continued, her voice growing stronger and more authoritative with each word, "I've traveled through this exact terminal dozens of times over the past 5 years. I've sat in board meetings in Ankara with your government officials. I've negotiated trade agreements worth millions of dollars between our countries. I've had coffee with your foreign minister in the lounge you just tried to deny me access to. And yet, today, you took one look at me and assumed I was lost, confused, or simply didn't belong." Behind the reception desk, a supervisor emerged from a small office, drawn by the unusual activity at the normally quiet VIP entrance. The woman was dressed in a crisp uniform with multiple insignia that marked her as senior management, her expression professional, but increasingly concerned as she took in the scene before her. She had been airport supervisor for 8 years and had developed an instinct for situations that could escalate beyond simple customer service issues. "Is there a problem here?" the supervisor asked, her voice carefully professional but carrying an undertone of wariness as she assessed the dynamic between the staff and this clearly agitated passenger. Mehmet handed her the diplomatic passport without a word, his face pale and his hands visibly shaking. The supervisor, her name tag read Elif Demir, Senior Operations Manager, accepted the document with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to handling VIP passenger issues. But as she opened it and began reading, her eyes widened progressively, and she looked up at Amara with an expression that mixed respect with poorly concealed horror. The reality of the situation hit her immediately. They hadn't just refused service to an ordinary passenger, they had essentially created a diplomatic incident with someone who had the power to make their lives very complicated. Ambassador positions weren't given to people without significant political connections and influence. This woman could pick up a phone and reach the highest levels of both Ghanaian and Turkish government. "Ambassador Okafor," Elif said, her voice now carrying the formal tone reserved for high-ranking officials, "I am deeply, deeply sorry for any inconvenience or disrespect you have experienced. Please accept our sincerest apologies for this completely unacceptable treatment." Amara nodded slowly, acknowledging the apology but making it clear that this was far from resolved. "I appreciate your courtesy, Miss Demir. But I want to be very clear about something. I'm less concerned about my own experience, though it was certainly unpleasant, and far more worried about how many other qualified individuals have been turned away from this lounge based on similar assumptions about their appearance or background." The supervisor's face paled further as the broader implications of what had occurred began to sink in. This wasn't just about a single incident of poor customer service. This was about systemic bias that could expose the airport to significant legal and public relations consequences. If Ambassador Okafor chose to pursue this matter through official channels, it could result in investigations, policy reviews, and the kind of negative publicity that could damage the airport's international reputation. "Your Excellency," Elif said carefully, clearly trying to contain what she recognized could become a much larger problem. Would you allow us to escort you to the lounge immediately while we address this matter internally? I can assure you that we will conduct a thorough review of our procedures. Actually, Amara said, picking up her briefcase with deliberate precision, I have a different suggestion. I'd like to speak with your airport director immediately. This conversation needs to happen at the highest level of your organization because the assumptions made here today reflect something much bigger than a single interaction between staff and passenger. The request sent a chill through both guards and the supervisor. Meeting with the airport director meant this incident would be officially documented, investigated, and likely reported up through government channels. For Hassan and Mehmet, it could mean the end of their careers. For the airport, it could mean international scrutiny and mandatory policy changes. Of course, Your Excellency, Elif replied, though her voice betrayed her anxiety. I'll contact Director Yilmaz immediately. Would you prefer to wait in the lounge while I arrange the meeting? I think I'll wait right here, Amara said, settling into one of the chairs near the reception desk. This way, I can observe how your staff interacts with other passengers who might not fit their expectations of who belongs in premium airport facilities. As word of the incident began to spread through the airport's communication channels, staff members throughout the terminal became aware that something significant was unfolding. The story traveled quickly. VIP lounge guards had refused entry to a high-ranking diplomat, and now the entire situation was being escalated to the highest levels of airport management. Within 30 minutes, Director Kemal Yilmaz himself appeared at the VIP lounge entrance. He was a distinguished man in his early 60s, with silver hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to handling delicate situations. He had served in various capacities within Turkey's aviation industry for over 3 decades, and understood immediately that this situation required his personal attention. Ambassador Okafor, he said, extending his hand respectfully, I am Kemal Yilmaz, Director of Operations for this terminal. I want to personally apologize for the completely inappropriate treatment you received from our staff today. This behavior does not represent the values or standards of our facility. Amara rose to shake his hand, noting the genuine concern in his voice. Director Yilmaz, I appreciate you taking the time to address this personally. I hope we can use this incident as an opportunity to examine and improve your policies regarding passenger treatment. Absolutely, Yilmaz replied without hesitation. I've already ordered a full review of our customer service protocols, and I can assure you that there will be immediate consequences for the staff members involved. Beyond that, we'll be implementing additional training programs to ensure this never happens again. Over the next hour, Amara engaged in a detailed conversation with the airport director about the broader implications of what had occurred. She spoke eloquently about the subtle but persistent barriers that people of color faced in international travel, the assumptions made about their economic status and social position, and the importance of treating every passenger with dignity regardless of their appearance. This isn't just about me, she explained, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent years advocating for equitable treatment on international stages. This is about creating an environment where every passenger feels welcome and respected. When your staff make assumptions based on racial characteristics, they're not just providing poor customer service, they're perpetuating systemic inequities that have real consequences for real people. Director Yilmaz listened intently, taking notes and asking thoughtful questions about how the airport could better train its staff to avoid such incidents. He understood that this conversation wasn't just about damage control. It was about fundamental improvements to their organizational culture. As the immediate crisis was being managed, a more thorough investigation began to reveal troubling patterns. When airport management reviewed security footage and incident reports from the past year, they discovered that the VIP lounge guards had challenged passengers of color at a rate significantly higher than white passengers, even when those passengers presented identical credentials. The investigation revealed that Hassan, in particular, had a documented history of questioning passengers who didn't match his mental image of who belonged in premium airport facilities. There were written complaints from business executives, government officials, and celebrities who happened to be Black, Arab, or South Asian, all describing similar experiences of being assumed to be in the wrong place or lacking proper documentation. Mehmet, while newer to the position, had quickly absorbed the biases modeled by his senior colleague. The review showed that he had begun exhibiting similar patterns of behavior, suggesting that the problem was not just individual prejudice, but a systemic issue within the department's culture. News of the incident began to spread beyond the airport through diplomatic channels. The Ghanaian embassy in Ankara received a formal report about the treatment of their ambassador, and they, in turn, communicated with the Turkish Foreign Ministry. While both governments worked to address the matter diplomatically, the incident served as a reminder of the ongoing challenges faced by people of color in international travel. Ambassador Okafor received calls of support from colleagues throughout the diplomatic community, many of whom shared similar experiences of being profiled or discriminated against during their travels. These conversations revealed that her experience was far from unique. It was part of a broader pattern of assumptions and biases that affected diplomatic personnel, business leaders, and ordinary citizens alike. The incident also attracted attention from international media outlets that specialized in covering diplomatic affairs. While Ambassador Okafor chose not to grant interviews about the specific incident, the story served to highlight ongoing issues of racial profiling in international travel settings. True to his word, Director Yilmaz implemented comprehensive changes to the airport's customer service approach. The modifications were extensive and far-reaching. First, all customer-facing staff underwent mandatory bias awareness training conducted by specialists in cross-cultural communication and unconscious prejudice. The training included role-playing exercises, case studies of problematic interactions, and specific guidance on treating all passengers with equal respect, regardless of their appearance. Second, the airport implemented a new verification system for premium services that focused entirely on documentation rather than subjective assessments of passenger appropriateness. Staff were given clear guidelines about when and how to request credentials, with specific instructions that appearance-based assumptions were never acceptable grounds for challenging a passenger's access rights. Third, a formal complaint process was established that allowed passengers to report discriminatory treatment, with guarantees that such reports would be investigated thoroughly and resolved quickly. This system included direct communication channels to senior management, ensuring that serious incidents couldn't be dismissed or ignored by lower-level staff. Fourth, regular audits were scheduled to review passenger interaction patterns, specifically looking for statistical disparities in how different demographic groups were treated. These audits would use both security footage analysis and passenger feedback to identify potential bias in staff behavior. Finally, the consequences for discriminatory behavior were made clear and severe. Staff members who engaged in profiling or biased treatment of passengers would face immediate disciplinary action, including potential termination for serious violations. For the two guards directly involved in the incident, the consequences were swift and significant. Hassan, whose pattern of discriminatory behavior was revealed during the investigation, was terminated from his position. His years of service couldn't excuse the documented evidence of biased treatment toward passengers of color, and airport management determined that his behavior created liability risks they couldn't accept. Mehmet faced a different outcome. Because he was newer to the position and his discriminatory behavior appeared to be learned rather than deeply ingrained, he was given an opportunity for rehabilitation. He was suspended without pay for 2 weeks, required to complete extensive bias training, and placed on probationary status for 6 months. His future employment would depend on demonstrating genuine change in his approach to passenger interactions. The supervisor, Elif Demir, also faced consequences for failing to address the problematic patterns of behavior among her staff. While she wasn't terminated, she received a formal reprimand and was required to undergo additional management training focused on creating inclusive workplace cultures and addressing discriminatory behavior among subordinates. Several weeks after the incident, Ambassador Okafor reflected on the experience during a keynote speech at an international conference on diplomatic relations and cross-cultural understanding. Her words carried the weight of not just personal experience, but professional expertise in navigating complex international dynamics. "Respect isn't something you earn through titles or passports," she told the audience of diplomats, business leaders, and civil rights advocates. "It's something every human being deserves from the moment they walk through your doors, approach your counter, or enter your establishment. When we make assumptions based on appearance, we don't just insult individuals. We diminish our shared humanity and undermine the very principles of equality that democratic societies claim to uphold." She continued, "The incident at Istanbul Airport wasn't unique. It was simply one example of the countless daily interactions where people are judged by their appearance rather than their character, their credentials, or their contributions to society. The real tragedy isn't that I was momentarily inconvenienced. It's that this type of treatment discourages talented individuals from pursuing opportunities, participating in international exchanges, or even traveling for business or pleasure." Her speech was widely quoted in international media and became part of the official record at the United Nations Commission on Human Rights, where it was cited in discussions about travel discrimination and the responsibility of international transit hubs to maintain equitable treatment standards. The VIP lounge incident, as it came to be known within both diplomatic circles and the aviation industry, served as a catalyst for broader discussions about bias in travel settings. Other airports began reviewing their own policies and training programs, concerned that similar incidents at their facilities could damage their reputations and relationships with diplomatic communities. Professional associations for airport management personnel developed new best practice guidelines that specifically addressed preventing discrimination in customer service interactions. These guidelines emphasize the importance of treating all passengers with equal dignity and respect, regardless of their appearance, accent, or perceived social status. The incident also contributed to ongoing research about implicit bias in service industries. Academic studies cited Ambassador Okafor's experience as an example of how unconscious prejudices can affect professional interactions, even when individuals don't consider themselves to be prejudiced or discriminatory. International business organizations began including discussions of travel discrimination in their diversity and inclusion training programs, recognizing that their employees, particularly those who were people of color, might face additional challenges when traveling for business purposes. More than a year later, Ambassador Okafor returned to Istanbul Airport for another diplomatic trip. The difference in her treatment was immediately apparent. She was recognized by name by multiple staff members, greeted respectfully, and efficiently processed through all security and customs checkpoints. The VIP lounge, where the original incident had occurred, had undergone both physical and cultural changes. New signage emphasized the facility's commitment to welcoming all qualified passengers, and staff interactions were notably more professional and less presumptuous. During her visit to the lounge, Ambassador Okafor encountered Mehmet, the younger guard who had been involved in the original incident. He approached her respectfully and asked if he could speak with her privately. "Your Excellency," he said, his voice carrying genuine remorse, "I wanted to thank you for the way you handled our encounter last year. The training and education I received afterward opened my eyes to assumptions I didn't even realize I was making. I'm a better person and a better professional because of what happened, and I wanted you to know that your patience with someone who didn't deserve it made a real difference." Ambassador Okafor accepted his apology graciously and commended him for his growth and self-reflection. Their brief conversation served as a reminder that individual change was possible, even in situations where systemic problems seemed overwhelming. As Ambassador Okafor settled into her seat in the VIP lounge for her flight to Brussels, she reflected on how the incident had evolved from a moment of personal frustration into an opportunity for institutional change. The improvements at Istanbul Airport were real and measurable, but she knew that similar challenges persisted at airports, hotels, restaurants, and businesses around the world. Her phone buzzed with a message from a colleague in the Ghanaian diplomatic service asking for advice about handling a similar incident of discriminatory treatment at a European airport. The message served as a reminder that the work of promoting equality and respect was ongoing, requiring constant vigilance and advocacy. Looking out the window at the busy airport tarmac, Ambassador Okafor thought about the thousands of travelers who would pass through this facility in the coming weeks and months. Some would be diplomats like herself, others would be business travelers, tourists, students, or families visiting relatives. All of them deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their appearance or the assumptions others might make about their background. The changes implemented at Istanbul Airport represented progress, but Ambassador Okafor knew that lasting change required more than new policies and training programs. It required a fundamental shift in how people thought about difference, diversity, and the assumptions they made about others based on limited visual information. As her flight was called for boarding, she gathered her belongings and walked toward the gate, passing by the same security checkpoint where the incident had begun more than a year earlier. The space looked the same, but she knew that the culture had changed in meaningful ways. The guard at the checkpoint recognized her and nodded respectfully as she passed, a simple gesture that represented the kind of basic human courtesy that should be universal, but too often was not. The VIP lounge incident served as a powerful reminder that respect and dignity are not luxuries to be earned, but fundamental rights that every person deserves. When institutions and individuals fail to provide that basic level of human courtesy, they don't just harm those they mistreat. They diminish themselves and undermine the values they claim to uphold. Ambassador Okafor's experience demonstrated the importance of standing up to discrimination with grace and determination, using positions of influence to create positive change rather than simply seeking personal vindication. Her response to the incident created ripple effects that extended far beyond a single airport, contributing to broader conversations about equality, respect, and human dignity in an interconnected world. The story also highlighted the potential for individual and institutional growth when confronted with evidence of discriminatory behavior. While change can be difficult and uncomfortable, it is possible when people are willing to examine their assumptions and commit to treating others with the respect they deserve. And just like that, a moment of assumption became a lesson in dignity, respect, and the power of standing up for what's right. This story reminds us that true authority doesn't come from demanding recognition or wielding power over others, but from how we carry ourselves with grace, even when others fail to see our worth. Ambassador Okafor's experience teaches us that every interaction is an opportunity to either reinforce harmful stereotypes or challenge them, to either perpetuate discrimination or stand against it. When we choose respect, dignity, and fairness in our dealings with others, we contribute to a world where everyone can travel, work, and live without fear of being judged by their appearance rather than their character. If this story moved you and made you think about the assumptions we all make about others, make sure to subscribe for more powerful stories of resilience, dignity, and the quiet strength that changes minds and institutions. Turn on notifications so you never miss these important tales. And remember, respect is always the right choice, even when it's not the easy choice. The fight for equality and dignity continues in airports, offices, schools, and communities around the world. Each of us has the power to make a difference through our words, actions, and the respect we show to every person we encounter, regardless of whether they look like us or come from the same background. Thanks for listening to this story, and I'll see you in the next one, where we'll continue exploring the profound impact of choosing respect over assumption, dignity over discrimination, and justice over prejudice.